Hello chess fans, I'm back with more news about the new strongest chess engine ever, Stockfish NNUE. This engine combines the neural network approach of AlphaZero and Leela Chess Zero with the brute force computing of the latest versions of Stockfish. Now, in our last video, we mentioned that this engine was gearing up for a 200 game match against Leela Chess Zero. That match has been completed and it got absolutely destroyed, just absolutely massacred, 110.5 to 89.5. However, the developers then reached out and said, whoa, things are not optimally configured here. We can improve this performance with better configurations. They've sent updated instructions, and now Stockfish NNUE is contesting a 600 game match with Leela Chess Zero and the latest version of Stockfish, and it is winning. In this video, we are going to look at one of the games where Stockfish NNUE played Leela Chess Zero and it did not get destroyed. Instead, it won a fine attacking game in the style of the great Romantic Masters. To keep things exciting in the Chess.com Computer Chess Championship, the engines are given opening books to play with tons of dynamic and gambit positions. This game, for example, opens up with e4, e5, bishop c4, and pawn to f5. This is the Calabrese counter gambit in response to the bishop's opening, evidently. Now, both engines will have to play this position with white and with black to keep things fair. Stockfish NNUE has white this time around, and it pushes forward with d4. It is sensing opportunity because of the push f5, which softens the light squares, and white is already in position to try and exploit that. d4 is trying to open as many lines as possible, the classic response to such a move as pawn to f5. Now here we see captures on d4 and knight to h3, a strong but unintuitive move. As humans, we are taught from a young age not to put our knights on the edge of the board because they will lack mobility. But in this case, what matters is that white is ready to castle and the knight has developed without blocking queen to h5 check. For example, if captures on e4, queen to h5 check, g6, queen to e5 wins the rook on h8 and wins the game. This is a trap that beginners regularly fall into. So after knight h3, we see knight to f6, and now e5 and knight g4. We can already pause and assess the difficulties that Leela is trying to overcome in this position. For example, how do you castle? The answer, you do not get to castle. This bishop on c4 is too strong, and there's not going to be any chance for Leela to castle in this game. Also, this pawn here on e5, it is a monster. It is influencing the middle of the board in a tremendous way, making it very difficult for black to develop the minor pieces and to coordinate them. It is also stopping d6 or d5 because captures will open up the e file and bring a huge attack against black's king on e8. So in this position, the problems for black may already be insurmountable. So we see castles. In this position, if knight takes, then rook e1 and f4 will win the knight. So we see knight c6, rook e1, bishop e7, and now that the e-file has been closed, black is ready to capture on e5. We see Stockfish NNUE anticipate that and pull the loose bishop back to b3. Knight takes e5, and now knight d2, pawn to a5, thinking about a4 trying to inconvenience that bishop, and knight f3, d6, a4 for white, stopping a4 from black. And in this position, Leela is already looking for a move and struggling to find it. It plays the move king to f8, a very sad move. The king steps off of the open e-file, but it is not that much safer on f8. Also, this rook on h8 is wondering how it's ever going to get into the game. Spoiler alert, it is not. It is going to die on that square. After king to f8, I think the ball is firmly in white's court. So king f8, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, bishop f6, a cheap threat to win the queen that any computer is going to immediately stop, queen to e3, c6, bishop d2, h6, and rook a to d1. Now, in this position, I think white is sitting pretty. Look at all these pieces. Everything is on its optimal square pretty much. Everything is centralized, has access to good squares, has access to strong targets. The king on g1, totally safe. The opposite is true for black. Especially the black rooks in the corner are really struggling to get active, and the black king on f8 does not feel safe at all. So in this position, after rook a to d1, we see pawn to g5, queen g3, and pawn to f4. I'm really struggling to explain g5 and f4, but I guess when you don't have anything better to do, you might as well push your pawns. And now we get knight takes f4, a beautiful sacrifice of the knight for 2 pawns. After pawn takes, we get bishop takes f4. Now there's a threat here to capture on e5 and win material because of the pin on the d file, so queen to e7. Now I'm singing the praises of the sacrifice of the knight for 2 pawns, but as a human, it is not easy to see how to break through in this position. In fact, it looks like black may be close to finishing development, coordinating the position, and you could be left with nothing. In fact, there is only one winning move in this position. I encourage you to pause your video and try to figure out what it is. Well, to be honest, that was kind of a trick question because I don't expect anyone, literally anyone watching this video, unless you're a computer engineer yourself, to find the winning move. The winning move is pawn to h3. Only winning move. Why is that the only winning move? First, let's consider the alternatives. In this position, you want to try and break through tactically, but it turns out your back rank is weak. If rook takes d6, queen takes d6, in this position, capturing on e5 with the rook either now or later is going to open up your back rank and you are going to get mated. You have basically the same problems after rook takes e5. Rook takes e5, bishop takes e5, and now a beautiful idea, rook takes d6, and it turns out though that queen takes d6, bishop takes, and queen d1. You have exposed your back rank again. An alternative that is much better but is not winning is bishop takes h6 check. If you found this move, I kind of feel like you deserve full credit because h3 was too insane to find, and this is the second best move. After bishop takes h6, rook takes, you have queen g8. The problem is that after bishop takes h6, king e8, there's not a finishing blow. It looks like pawn to f4 might do the job. You've got a pin here on the e file. But in this position, there is bishop to h4, and you're skewered, and this position is insanely messy, but you're not winning. So after queen to e7, it is this move pawn to h3, and it turns out that with the back rank covered, there is no defense to rook takes d6 or rook takes e5, crushing sacrificial ideas. So after pawn to h3, there was nothing better for Leela, so once again, it decided to push a pawn, and it played pawn to h5. And in this position, you can win with either rook takes d6 or rook takes e5, and Stockfish NNUE decides on rook takes e5. Now first, let's consider d takes e5. In this position with the d file open, you're able to go back to your idea bishop h6 check, because king e8 will not save the day in this case because of queen g6 and you mate. So after bishop h6, you can consider rook takes h6 and queen g8. We've already seen this mate. And you can also consider the more resilient bishop g7, but in this position, after bishop g7, there is rook to d8 and you force mate. This is a beautiful decoy sacrifice. Queen takes, king over, and queen f7 and mate. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. So after rook takes e5, instead of opening the d file, we see bishop takes e5. And another great sacrifice, rook takes d6. A beautiful double sacrifice of the rooks, first on e5 and then on d6. First off, if bishop takes d6, then bishop takes d6 pins and wins the queen. And if you have queen takes d6, then there is bishop takes e5. The check on d1 is no longer mate, and after king h2, there is no way to save this rook, thanks to ideas of queen g8 and queen g7. Once the rook falls, white's attack will also be overwhelming. So, after bishop takes e5, rook takes d6, in this position we see bishop takes f4, and you still need good strong moves to finish this game off. In this position there's queen takes f4 check, and there are 2 king moves you can consider here. First off, if king g7, then we have a sequence of queen checks. Queen d4 check, king h7, queen d3 check, the queen goes into g6, and now after king f8, another beautiful rook sacrifice, rook to d8, decoying the queen away so that you can mate with queen f7. After queen takes f4 check, therefore the king goes to e8, king e8, and bishop f7 check. You're still down a rook and you're sacrificing more material. Queen takes and queen e5 check. You're hitting the king and the rook here. If king goes to f8, then queen takes h8 wins right away. If king up, then there's mate. And if the queen chooses to block after queen takes h8, then you simply have, well, honestly, multiple moves, but this will win the queen here. In fact, you actually can force mate with queen f6 and queen f7 and rook to d8. So after bishop f7 and then queen takes and queen e5 check, we see bishop e6, rook takes, and still we're down a rook, but the king must go to d7 to avoid this rook falling with check. And in this position, you have queen d6 check, king back, and rook to e7. You're threatening the queen, and you're threatening mate here on c7, so the queen must give itself up, and after queen takes, white is totally winning. Now, materially, white has a queen and 2 pawns, which is stronger than 2 rooks, but not by a lot. But what really matters is that both rooks are still in their starting squares, and this king is still exposed. Therefore, there's really no hope for black. We're going to zip through the rest of the moves. White is going to pick off some pawns and start advancing the white pawns as well. We see some maneuvering to get the queen to an optimal square. And what I really like here is after the capture on c2 in this position, queen b5 check is a nice accurate move that picks off a rook with a fork next turn no matter what. If you go to the a file, there is queen to a4 check and this rook falls. If you go to c8, there is queen to f5 check and this rook falls again. But after king c7 in the game, it's the rook on h8 that falls instead. I did give you a spoiler and tell you that the rook would fall on h8 without ever getting to move. So queen takes h8, and now I'm going to zip through the rest of the moves. It's not going to take long for white to force mate here. We're going to make a second queen, and then the king is going to be very quickly mated here after queen to e4. A beautiful game and a beautiful finish. I hope that you enjoyed this game. If you want to see more games like it, go to chess.com/CCC, short for Computer Chess Championship, and you can watch the match that is currently in progress. Also, I encourage you to check out the video with the previous game, which is also beautiful in different ways.